think you should. Yeah.
Soldier 76 has been a staple in the meta for a long time now. Ever since his buffs to his damage came along, even during the tank meta, Soldier 76 has seen play. He is by far the best DPS still, and has been for quite some time. And a lot of people would say that makes him OP. But I disagree with this. I don't think Soldier 76 is OP. He may be easy to use, he may dish out the best damage, and be all around a very solid pick. However, I don't think he's OP. He might seem OP because he's been by far the best DPS for a while, and he's super valuable in almost any team comp. However, I actually think Soldier isn't OP because he's setting a new standard. I think Soldier 76 is where Blizzard wants DPS heroes to be. Soldier 76 is the ideal state for a DPS hero as far as power level goes, because as we saw in the tank meta, Soldier 76 still saw play even with tanks being so darn powerful, which means if we can get all the other DPS heroes to the level at Soldier 76 is at, then we should see a pretty balanced meta where all the heroes see a fairly equal amount of play depending on situations, enemy team comps, the map, and other things. It should be a far more dynamic game. With this in mind, I'd like to go over some changes that I think we could be seeing in the near future for DPS heroes. Keep in mind, these are only speculation, and I'm only suggesting these because I think they're easy for Blizzard to implement and they're on heroes that need the buff. Let's start off with my personal favorite, and this might be biased, but I personally think McCree is a little lacking right now. I've said Soldier 76 isn't OP, yet Soldier 76 will beat McCree 9 times out of 10 if both players are at equal skill level. The range at which McCree can actually win this fight is flashbang range. Everywhere else, and Soldier 76 can pretty easily win the fight with his high DPS and his easy to use weapon, as well as Helix rockets and healing. On top of this, Soldier 76 does more damage, so he can drop shields faster, he has that self-sustain, and he has more mobility. So if we want to bring up McCree to this standard, I think a few things need to be done. First of all, let's talk about the fact that McCree doesn't have any sustain. Heroes like Reaper and Soldier 76 and Roadhog, these heroes all have some sort of sustain. Even Tracer and Sombra kind of technically have their own form of sustain. So how can we balance McCree fairly without adding sustain to his kit? Because that's difficult, and Blizzard isn't looking to rework McCree, I don't think. I actually have 3 ideas that could help McCree drastically, but I only think Blizzard needs to implement 2 of them. I think 2 out of these next 3 ideas, if he was given them, would make him fairly balanced. The first idea is very simple. Give him plus 50 HP. Now, this may sound ridiculous, but if we compare McCree to every other DPS hero in the game, we can see that McCree not only lacks in any form of self-healing or sustain, but he also lacks in mobility. And mobility is something we'll talk about more in a bit, but his role is pretty lackluster. Reaper has 250 HP, and he can pick up more off the ground. And on top of this, he arguably has the best escape in the game, which we're actually going to talk about more later. But Wraith form can get you out of pretty much every situation. It's a little bit crazy. Soldier has mobility and healing. Sombra has mobility and healing. Tracer has mobility and kind of healing. Genji and Pharah are the only 2 attack heroes that don't have healing, but I mean, their mobility is through the roof, and they have 200 HP, so why would McCree be at the same amount of HP as these people that can move much faster than he can and be far more difficult to actually hit? The other change I'd like to see is potentially a reduced cooldown on his roll and or his flashbang. So I'm thinking the roll would be a little bit more appropriate. The flashbang is very powerful, so I think you should have to use it in a skillful manner and not just be able to throw it out whenever. But I think the roll, given that it doesn't move you a lot, it does reload your ammo, it doesn't move you a lot, I think the cooldown could be lowered by like 2 seconds in my opinion. It's pretty bad when you're caught out as McCree. If your roll is on cooldown and you're caught out, you're screwed. And I guess that is part of the whole thing with McCree. You have to position yourself properly. However, with his damage drop-off not being the best right now, I mean, his shots at really long ranges don't deal enough damage in my opinion. I think because you have to get a little bit closer, having this reduced cooldown on roll could make McCree a little bit better. And then the last change I think could help McCree is one I've just mentioned, which is a increased range on his Peacekeeper. Just a little bit longer range, that way he doesn't have to put himself in any of these situations. Actually, increased range, if they picked that, would probably be the only buff he needs, because if he's not that close to enemies, he won't need the sustain as much, the extra HP I mean, and if he's not close to enemies, he also won't need to roll as much to get out of sticky situations. So I think if you pick that, that might be the only change needed, but as far as the other two go, I think one or two of these changes could really help McCree out and put him at that same power level as Soldier 76. We mentioned earlier that Reaper's Wraith form is one of the best escapes in the game, and I mean that. I mean 3 seconds of invulnerability and increased move speed, and you can get back to your team from a lot of sticky situations. However, Reaper is a little bit weak right now, and he might not be too weak, he's situational for sure. However, I think there's one change that could help him greatly, because right now his Wraith form you can only use to escape. The enemy team can predict when you'll come out of it, because you're always in it for exactly 3 seconds. I think Reaper should be able to cancel his Wraith form early, and I think this for a lot of reasons. For one, if you bait out a McCree's flashbang or a Roadhog's hook with your Wraith form, you're still screwed. You cannot get the kill because the other person knows exactly when you're coming out of Wraith form, and the ability you just dodged isn't going to be that useful because the enemy person can either back away from you because they know you're going to come out of Wraith form to kill them, call their team over because you're in it for 3 whole seconds, or just reload their weapon and their ability will be off cooldown very shortly. It's kind of unfair. Like when I bait out a hook or a flashbang as Reaper, it's not satisfying at all because you can't get the kill. You can't get the kill on the McCree because he'll roll back, get away from you, land some headshots. You can't get the kill on Roadhog because his hook is going to be off cooldown very shortly once again, and he can just back away from you and heal up to survive until it's off cooldown, in which case he can one-shot you. So it seems kind of unfair that Reaper shouldn't be able to cancel his Wraith form early and leave it and start shooting again. It would be very fair, I think, if I bait out a flashbang, I Wraith form the flashbang, I should be able to come out of Wraith form immediately and start firing on McCree. The element of surprise is what you need as Reaper, and Wraith form kind of takes that away. Tell me what you think about that one. Let's move on to the next change I'd like to see. Now, I've got 2 more changes I'd like to talk about, and these ones are more controversial. The first 2 I think are definites, but these last 2 are a little bit different. A lot of people seem to think Sombra is pretty viable now, while on the other hand, there's a lot of people that also think Sombra is still garbage. I don't think she's either super viable or super garbage. I think she's kind of middle of the road right now. However, I think there's one small change Sombra could use, and that is not more damage, not a decreased hack time, just a little bit of reduced spread on her weapon. The spread on her weapon right now is so huge, it seems to only work super well against tanks, but her damage output isn't high enough to deal with tanks. It just doesn't really make too much sense to me. With a lower damage output, which is what she has, a fairly low damage output, I think this spread can definitely be reduced 10 to 20%. In my opinion, it can definitely be brought down a bit because you can't burst fire with her either. Soldier 76 you can burst with. Sombra you can't afford to wait the time it takes for your weapon to settle. You just gotta spray that thing, and that doesn't seem to feel right. I think they want Sombra to be a skill hero, so I think making her a skill hero in the aiming department as well could be very cool. And the last change I'd like to talk about is an interesting one. It's definitely up for debate because Junkrat is an interesting fellow. At the lower ranks, and I think like bottom 30%, Junkrat dominates. At mid ranks, people can understand how to deal with him, and at higher ranks, he sees no play at all. This makes a hero very, very hard to balance, I'd say. So I think the one thing they could do to Junkrat, although it's not necessary because like I said, he's hard to balance, is increase the velocity on his projectiles just a little bit, because they do move admittedly like the speed of molasses, dude. They are so slow, it's kind of ridiculous. So I think that change could happen, but I don't know. Like I said, this one's controversial. I'm not too sure how I feel about it, but I think Junkrat could use some love, maybe? I don't know, man. As far as the other DPS heroes go, I think Hanzo and Widowmaker are actually fine right now. They're both very niche picks that use in various situations. Symmetra, yes, she is a DPS, is definitely powerful enough, doesn't need any help. Mei, very niche hero, utility pick that can dominate on certain maps. Soldier 76 is by far a top tier pick, and I think in that top tier, we also see Pharah and Genji. I think they're both very good heroes as well, and I think that really wraps up all of them. Torbjorn and Bastion. Bastion's going to be good after the changes, I think. And Torbjorn is just going to be Torbjorn. There's really not much else you could say about him. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like down below and tell me what you think. Be sure to click that video on screen. That video will take you to the secret to getting top 500 in Overwatch in less than 12 hours. It's the best video you'll ever see. So check out that, and I'll see you guys all in the next video. Have a good one. Lone Hawk out.